She challenges the notion that people are oblivious to the buildings that surround us. So let's delve into the topic, please.
Annyeong aseo. Did I say that okay? My name is Abigail. Now, I'm not an architect, I'm not a developer, I'm not an academic, and I'm definitely not a politician. I'm actually a linguist, and somehow I've ended up in this room, and I'm not really sure quite how. But I suppose the point I'm trying to make is that I'm someone in this room that maybe most represents the public. I'm also the global head of the Humanise Campaign, a campaign designed to boost the public conversation about the importance of buildings to our lives. And our aim is to shine a light on what people think and feel about the buildings which line their streets and communities, and to relay this to the people with the power to make the changes needed. And there is an assumption, and Thomas talked about this morning, in this industry that the public just don't get buildings, they just don't understand building design or architecture. But today, I'm going to share with you brand new research that rejects the idea that they are oblivious to the problem of bland, soulless buildings. But before we get into it, I thought I'd share a little walk I do when I'm in the studio in London. And like all of you, or many of you in the room, I'm sure, want to get out and try and explore the city when you can get a bit of a break from the screen. And I'm very lucky I have a boss who encourages us to take a lunch hour. And this is the route I take to go to buy my lunch. And it's not the most direct route I could take to that Italian cafe where I get my salad, but I deliberately choose it because of the way it makes me feel. None of us needs to be a design or architectural expert to notice and experience the buildings on our streets. All of us intuitively know the buildings that make us feel good and those that don't. I know the buildings that lift me up and the ones that make me a bit sad and maybe a bit angry as well. And in the UK, it seems that I'm not on my own. Research that we've done has shown that 3 in 4 people say buildings impact how they feel. The public, people like me, are very much aware of the link between boring, sad, soulless buildings and their emotions. They're not oblivious at all. But what about here in South Korea? The Seoul Biennale has given us a perfect opportunity to ask people what they currently think and feel about buildings that form the backdrop to their lives or your lives. Over the past few months, we've worked with a research agency, Thinks Insight, and a Seoul-based research agency, Orange Intelligence, to really try and understand people's attitudes towards buildings. We were also very proud to work alongside Seoul National University. I'm sorry about your buildings. And my thanks goes to Professor Beck, who acted as our research advisor. And today we're revealing these research results for the first time. But before we dig into the numbers, I wanted to share our methodology. We took a mixed methods approach to the analysis and conducted both quantitative and qualitative surveys. We ran a survey of 1,000 people exploring their attitudes towards buildings in general and buildings in their neighbourhoods. We showed them images of Seoul and asked them to record their reactions. We also asked them to talk about their hopes for the city. And to give us a bit more of a deeper understanding, we actually also ran an online community poll with 11 people who we spoke to about the particular buildings that they engage with. And we ran a mix of discussion topics, asking participants to share buildings that make them feel something. And like Rebecca talked about yesterday, we showed them examples and asked for their responses through emojis or imagining those buildings as people even. Who would they be? And we then spent time with these people walking through the city and filming them and watching them how they react in the city. Now, this research is really representative of the population of Seoul. We set quotas for age and gender and ensured we had people who lived in all districts across the city, who lived in different home types and had spent different amounts of time living in Seoul. All this is to say that it's a really robust study and a really accurate and up-to-date picture of what people living in Seoul, what people like you think and feel about buildings in this city. And our headline finding is that a whopping 90% of people in Seoul say that the way buildings look impact how they feel. This is an issue that impacts almost everyone in the city, and we were really surprised to see that this figure is higher than the UK figure I talked about earlier. So the last thing people are is oblivious to the buildings that surround them. The research also showed that people in Seoul can intuitively identify interesting and boring buildings, and there is a clear dislike for the current design of apartment buildings here. An incredible 97% describe them negatively. They are considered to be boring and soulless and evoke strong negative reactions. And to dig into this a bit more, I wanted to include some of the comments we had. Now, for those non-Korean speakers in the room, allow me to translate because I am a linguist. This first resident said, "The 5-story building stretching hundreds of meters feels like a wall of the city. Every time you pass it by it can feel suffocating." And this second comment, "Some may feel it's good because various infrastructures are concentrated there, but from a viewer's perspective, it feels overwhelming and suffocating. It somewhat resembles a prison, hardly a building that seems to have been built with human living in mind." Now let's just pause and think about that. Imagine feeling suffocated in the city where you live, feeling suffocated when you're outside in the open, feeling suffocated when you're trying to go about your daily business, going to work or supporting your family. None of us want to feel like that. And interestingly, the apartment complex is the one building type in the city that the public would rather see demolished than repaired and restored. Given a choice on development, there is a clear preference for adaptation in Seoul, with buildings like museums, schools, office blocks. Apartment buildings are the only exception. Over 2/3 of people want to see them demolished rather than rebuilt. And we've talked a lot about adaptation and reuse this morning. Now, there could be a range of reasons for this. There may be commercial benefit to demolishing buildings for residents and building newer, bigger ones. But the survey of 1,000 people did include 400 people who didn't live in apartment complexes. So combined with this insight, with the insight that 97% of people view these negatively, it's clear that there's not much love for Seoul's apartment buildings. So what did our research tell us about what people of Seoul hope for the future? Well, let's listen to some views.
저는 미래의 건축물들이 하나하나 그 개성이란 것이 꼭 특이한 외관 디자인을 말하는 것이 아니라 사람이 다 다르듯이 건축물도 획일화된 게 아니라 하나하나가 다 달랐으면 좋겠습니다. 그래서 이 개성 있는 건축물이 있는 동네에 가면은 많은 사람들이 그 경관으로서 하나의 즐길거리가 될 수 있다고 생각을 해서 그 동네에 활기도 불어넣고 좀 지역이 활성화되지 않을까 이런 생각을 가지고 있습니다.
예, 사실은 여태까지 이런 아파트 건물들이 꽤 많았는데 뭔가 이제 아파트도 단순하게 사람들이 거주하는 어떤 그런 공간성이 또 있겠지만 공간을 좀 넘어서서 사람들과 사람들이 같이 공유할 수 있는 어떤 커뮤니티적인, 즉 그래서 소통도 하고 또 그 안에서 뭔가 자신의 삶에 대한 어떤 퀄리티를 좀 올릴 수 있는, 그러면서도 더 자기 스스로가 삶에 대한 어떤 부분도 좀 느낄 수 있는 그러한 좀 다채로운 공간이 되었으면 좋겠어요.
So you see there that people gave really careful and thoughtful answers to our questions. And you can see they're really able to express clearly a direct link between the outsides of buildings and their quality of life. More proof again that the public are not oblivious. We also explored people's emotional connections to buildings in their neighbourhoods and specifically asked about whether people currently felt valued or cared for by the state of the buildings in their community, whether they felt those buildings provided character, and finally, whether they felt proud of where they lived. We then asked how would they like buildings to make them feel in the future. And you can see across all three measures, nearly 70% of people want to feel more valued and cared for, more character and more pride due to the buildings that are in their community. That's what they want to feel. They want to feel like they like and are proud of where they live. So there's a real gap between what people have been served and what they hope for in the future. They maybe want less of this and a bit more like this, buildings like socio-architects. The research showed that people don't necessarily want to go back either to the architecture of the past. The blend of traditional and modern in this city is a really loved feature. It's possible to have interesting and joyful modern buildings, and the public do respond positively to them. So the public in Seoul are not oblivious to the problem of boring, joyless buildings. In fact, 48% of people want to do something about it. So I hope I've shown that both in the UK and here in Seoul, two very different countries, two very different geographic contexts, two very different histories and cultural identities, there's a common thread. People are fed up with boring, soulless, suffocating development. They want something different. Now, what can we do with this insight? Does it really matter what the public think? Can it lead to any real change? Well, I love this quote from George Eliot from 1866. "The greatest power under heaven is public opinion, the ruling belief in society about what is right and what is wrong, what is honourable and what is shameful. That's the steam that is to work the engines." So it really does encapsulate the importance of public opinion in helping drive change, in helping society and also industry to progress. Now, some of you may know that in the UK we like to complain a bit. Well, here we do see examples in the UK of where people are using their voices to fight to save the buildings they love. And I'm sure Richard's maybe been involved in some of these fights. But when buildings that are loved, like the ones we've heard about this morning, buildings that hold meaning to people, when they're threatened with demolition, people do come out on the streets. We do see them protesting. So people are mobilizing in different ways. And here in South Korea, there's a hugely proud tradition of protest. And in fact, 2 days ago, just outside here, I saw hundreds of people being very noisy and holding up fans, not this one, but similar ones, and they were protesting for a fair wage. And that's another campaign in the UK that we've had, a living wage, where people have gone out and demanded change from employers. They wanted higher wages to meet the costs of living, the rising costs of living. There are movements like the climate movement that Thomas talked about yesterday. And here in Korea, the recycling movement and anti-smoking movement are examples of where people are coalescing together and starting to use their voices to campaign for change. And people can drive change. So this is what the Humanise Campaign is all about. We are putting people's voices at the heart of the debate about buildings in our cities and turning up the volume on the conversation for the need for more human buildings. Because as Dr. Upali Nanda said yesterday, where you live matters. But we're having fun with the campaign. We're taking the campaign to the streets, but also here to the beach. These are photos of us campaigning earlier in the summer in a town in the north of England, a little town called Morecambe. And I know not many of you will know this place. But it used to be a very proud Victorian seaside town, and the streets are littered with beautiful buildings that tell a story about that place. It's the kind of place you used to go to as a family, maybe in the 50s and 60s. The kind of place where you go to today to get an ice cream on the odd day it's sunny in the UK. We wanted to provoke a conversation with people who don't normally get asked about their views on the type of development and regeneration that's happening around them. We deliberately went to a place outside of London. And to start the conversation, we built a city of bland castles rather than sand castles, and invited beachgoers to have their say. And when people stopped by to see what was happening, when we started talking to them about what these weird, large, bland-looking sandcastles were, people immediately got the issue that we were talking about, and they opened up. They were given an opportunity to express their view. When it comes to the design of buildings, for too long, people have just been left out of the conversation. And it's really easy to distance ourselves from the word, the public. I don't actually like it. I think it's really othering. I'm going to quote Pali again, another thing she said yesterday, we neglect our personal lives in our professional lives. The public are not just an anonymous block of people. They're people like you, like me, trying to go about our daily lives, trying to make a difference in our family, for our family and for our community. They're nurses, they're teachers, they're social workers, as well as the lawyers, doctors, and politicians. Don't we all deserve buildings that make us feel valued? And as I hope I've shown, we are oblivious to the issue. In fact, we care deeply. So our campaign is trying to involve people worldwide in this conversation, and you can see, we had this little tiny town in Morecambe went global with the coverage we got for what we did. So what can we do to make our opinions and feelings known? Well, first of all, we're asking everybody to really just stop and notice. So maybe on your next lunch break, you go out into Seoul and you look and think about the route you take to get your sandwich or your bibimbap, and really notice the buildings around you. Secondly, we need to talk, and Thomas talked yesterday about joyfully shouting. We need to talk to our family, friends, our colleagues, or it might be a community group. We've had some amazing examples today of the engagement programs that have been run throughout the Biennale. Then finally, we need to find ways to make our voices heard that can really drive change. So we need to use opportunities there are to share our thoughts and feelings, and it could be through community engagement activity, like some of the artistic work we've heard today, or it might be in a planning decision where there's a community engagement process. But I actually was thinking, and I haven't run this past anyone, so I don't know if I'm going to be told off for this, but perhaps we could use these fans at the end of the Biennale, after everybody has participated and seen what we're trying to do, and maybe have a sit-in outside the Humanise wall to show how many people in this city care about buildings and want something different. By using all of our voices, we can really move this issue from the sidelines into the mainstream so that we're not ignored by some of the politicians or by the industry. And South Korea does this. I noticed when I saw the protest the other day, you shout joyfully, but also loudly. So I think if we all got together, we can make a really loud protest. So we are all impacted by the buildings on our streets. And the research shows that the majority want something better. Here in Seoul, we're inviting people to be a part of that conversation, and I cannot wait to get out and see and hear what people are talking about tomorrow, but I will need a translator with me. And over the course of these 2 days, we've heard the really robust science that there is. We know we've got the public on board, and we have the design, skill, tools, and amazing technology. It might be ancient technology like we've heard from this morning, to really make a difference. So what is stopping us? Hopefully in this room, with this new insight, we can forge a commitment to meeting public demand in Seoul for more joyful and engaging buildings, because all of us need more human buildings. Now, the research I've shared is available, and we have a campaign website, and we've set up a special landing page, which is in Korean. So I really hope that people, talk to your family and friends, join our campaign for change, because together we could be a much louder voice for change. Kamsa Hamnida. My name is Abigail Scott Paul. Thank you.
네. 발표 정말
Thank you so much, Abigail. So, Abigail, please take a seat on the sofa. So we go right into inviting Professor Jin Beck of SNU. He will be moderating this Q&A session. So please welcome Professor Beck. Yes, good afternoon. I am Jin Beck from SNU. I understand that we have about 15 minutes given to us. I will just briefly share with you my reflections for about 5 minutes on what Abigail has presented, and in the remainder of time, I will be asking certain questions. I don't know what your take is of this research, but I felt that the research outcome was very much encouraging. I don't remember the specific figure, but I think about 76% of people said that how the buildings are designed from the street level, that they had quite a bit of interest in how the buildings looked. And about 48% of people had said that in the future they would want to see a nicer looking building. If they had an opportunity to voice their views, that they would actively participate and engage so that they could share their thoughts on how a building should look. So since 1960s, as you know, Korean people have really focused on efficiency, development, fast growth. It was kind of cold, it was compact, and the growth and development happened in a very short period of time. We wanted to make our society very modern. And in that process, we forgot to take care of one thing, which is that we lost our face. We lost the facade. Our buildings lost their face. The cities lost their face. And if you don't have a face, then you lose an expression. There is no expression. So this is an urban city without expression, without its face, without the facade. Since the 1960s, for about 60 years, because we were so focused on efficiency, we overlooked the importance of our face, the expression. And in communication, the basic foundation is that person's expression. When you meet someone for the first time, the first thing you encounter is what? Their face and their expression, not what they're saying. When I go to another country, even though I don't speak their language, as long as that person is not a con man, as long as that person has a big smile on their face, and then I know that this person is empathetic, that this person has warmth. Maybe I don't know whether this person wants to give me an apple or what, but I know that this person engages with me positively by just looking at that person's facial expression. So someone's face could make me feel sad, and I could know whether I'm welcomed or I'm not welcomed by looking at someone's face. But in this urban architecture, we've lost that expression. We've lost that face, which is quite sad. We have a lot of K something, K this, K that, and one of that is K beauty. Now, a lot of people speak for K beauty, and I think one of the things that Korea can boast of is Korean cosmetics. And do you know where this word cosmetics comes from? It comes from cosmos. Cosmos is an order of cosmic order. Where does order come from? It comes from chaos. So every morning you wake up and you look all messy. Your hair is everywhere. You don't smell nice. But what do? we wash our face, we take a shower, we comb our hair, we put makeup on. So we then come out to the public space. So in the public space, order is important. Now, because we are a nation of K-beauty, when we go outside, when we enter a public space, what should be our demeanor be? What should be our attitude be? We're very good at that. But then if we bring that to the scale of an urban city, we're not there yet because we've been so obsessed with efficiency. We were just focused on making our buildings efficient inside. We consider it as a product, we consider it as a manufactured good, but we really forgot the fact that buildings themselves also need to have a face, that buildings have an expression to them. But we once again want to emphasize that we are a nation of K-beauty. We know how important that aspect is. So if we now have a new focus, I'm sure that we can come up with the buildings that are welcoming to others, the facade of buildings that will welcome different types of people into this city. So in that aspect, I believe that this research is meaningful because we conducted this survey against the citizens of this city and we were able to see that people had this affection, this love for the buildings and architecture, and they had hope, aspiration that going forward they will see buildings with better facade. And they also said that they would commit themselves to speak out, to say what it is that they want from the faces of the buildings. So I have a couple of questions.
The first one is with regard to the word humanize. We have talked a lot about humanize today. The meaning of humanize, I'm wondering what it is exactly. For example, today we criticized apartment buildings, which is where most of the residents in Seoul live today. And what did we say about apartments? Some citizens said they wanted to demolish the apartments, not even renovate them. How can we humanize the apartments in this context? And to be a bit more abstract, humanize is a very attractive word, but what is humanize? What should we do to be something that is humanize?
Great questions. I think for us in the campaign, we are trying to really demonstrate that something that is innate, a building that's made of material that doesn't literally speak to us, really matters to human beings. And we're trying to do that through the research that we're doing, we're talking to people, and we're also involving the industry in the conversation and trying to come up with different solutions. So for me, and reflecting on what you said this morning, it's almost about rehumanizing our towns and cities, because I think we do have the knowledge and the insight. And we do see next door to our studio in London, there is a really sad block of council flats. And you see sometimes the residents drawing graffiti on it. They're trying to find a way of using, temporary measures of painting or murals to make those places a bit nicer, a bit less boring, a bit less sad. So, and I think artists hold the key as well, because the work we've heard today, I'm so excited and I can't wait to go and see more of it. But they're able to work with those communities to draw out the voices, draw out the stories of what buildings mean to people and place, and being able to interpret that in a way that tells a different narrative. And Thomas talked this morning about building stories. We need to build more new stories about buildings and the importance in our lives.
What about your views of the apartment complexes of Korea? How can apartments be more humanized? What's your view, Abigail?
Well, I feel a bit unqualified to answer that question. And I've only been in Seoul for 72 hours. So I don't want to appear that I've got all the answers. But I think it's about listening. We've talked a lot about the need to talk and shout joyfully, but we also need to listen. And by understanding each other, and I hope this research can really start to seed new ways of seeing the world and how people are really impacted in the minds of those developers, and we've had some developers and we've got developers in the room today, but also the politicians as well, because we need to create the conditions in which politicians and developers have to act, because it's no longer socially acceptable to have unhealthy buildings that drag people down. What you do with those apartment buildings, I don't know, maybe there are a few designers in the room that can maybe have some solutions, but I do know design has a superpower. And more, designers can solve really complex problems. So I think that's a question for designers, really.
제가 아파트를 어떻게 바꾸는가 하는 거는 쉬운 문제가 아니기 때문에 알고 있지만 한번 이렇게 조금 티징하는 차원에서 여쭤보았습니다.
I was actually teasing you with this question because I know that changing apartment complexes is not easy. You said that on Oxford Street there's a building. What city was this?
그런 어떤 건물에 대해서
That residents went out on the streets to protect the buildings that they loved, and that there were active demonstrations, and I was very impressed by that. In our case, we had people out on the street to reduce the use of plastic, and we have many young people who demonstrated for the environment. But until now, we don't see that many demonstrators coming out on the street for architecture or buildings in the urban environment. And since the UK is slightly more advanced than we are, with regard to buildings and architecture, for voices to be raised, what do you think we need to do to be able to raise our voice?
I think there's a variety of tools and techniques that you can use. I mean, social media, some of the research that I didn't talk about, we talked about how would you make your voice known, and a lot of people were keen on using social media, and obviously it's a very digital culture here, so that could be finding an online community, and hopefully through Humanise, our channels, we'd be able to connect people up. So globally we have this online community that are talking about it in online spaces, but it's also kind of finding partners that can tell the message for us as well. And I would urge anybody in this room who wants to join us on this journey and help spread this message to come and be a part of this movement. And maybe partners that have a reach into the public that we don't. It might be a car manufacturer, for example, or it might be a Marks and Spencer. Maybe we could get them to rethink how they use their building, because the story about that Marks and Spencer building is a sad one. The protesters came out, there was a huge public backlash, but unfortunately the government have given the go-ahead for that building to be demolished. So in any social change campaign, despite how much campaigning you do need people, the politicians or the people with money to make the right decision, and sometimes that doesn't happen. But you need to keep going. So we need to build alliances, partnerships, and join forces, and that's why we're so excited to be here in Seoul. And it does feel like, like you were saying, K-beauty's gone mainstream. Well, could K-Humanise go mainstream through Seoul?
K-Humanize 굉장히 좋은 프레이즈인 것 같습니다. 말씀하신 것처럼
Yes, I love that phrase, K-Humanize. I really like that. Now, what about global network? I think what we could do is we could really build a global network so that we could spread Humanise Campaign in different individual countries, because each of the countries has different level of development when it comes to civil society or civic society. And for certain countries without that capability to really implement the Humanise program may not be very easy. So if we build a global network and really push Humanise Campaign, then I think that will be for the benefit of all. Now, for Humanise Campaign going forward in further developing this initiative, are there any improvements that needs to be made? Anything that you believe it needs to be further improved in terms of Humanise work?
Well, we want to cut through. I don't know if that translates in the same way in this country, but in the world there are a lot of issues. We're up against some really difficult, challenging times globally, geopolitics, socioeconomic issues, and we have to get better at telling the story. And we started by talking about storytelling. We've heard some brilliant stories here. And that's where we can work with others to help tell this story, work with creatives, work with artists to tell the story, work with the media. I know there's some media here to be able to tell that story. Because until we grow this conversation, it will be drowned out. But I'm really convinced that events like the Seoul Biennale and what is happening in the park and across the road and in the communities, that starts to build a really strong story that is really hard to cut down. You know, you can't dismiss when you see people react and voice, like in the film, the people they're voicing. We didn't give them a script. That's their unprompted words. So we need to do more of it, and we need to, you know, kind of maintain momentum, grow like a snowball, and that's what we hope we can do. And so hopefully this Biennale will influence other Biennales, or developers that have been here will influence within their own practice. So it's bit by bit, by working together and collaborating, we can drive this change, I think.
네. 저기
I have many questions, but there are probably also many questions from the floor. But because we don't have much time, I think I need to close this session. I will say something, but Abigail, would you like to say some final comments after me? I would like to thank Abigail for sharing the research results, and I think the research results were very positive. I'm not sure you know this story, but when the enemy enters into the city will be destroyed, and in order to save the city from being destroyed by the enemy, there's a good way to do it. If you make the buildings beautiful, then the enemy will not destroy it. Leon Battista Alberti said this in the 15th century. If you build something that is beautiful, it will last forever, and the instinctive need to destroy the building from the enemy will not be put in practice. But we don't want buildings to be just beautiful superficially. We need something that we can care for. And even if I own the building, I'm not its sole owner. It's my family that's using it. My future generations will be using it. So I need to preserve and protect the building for others and future generations. The Humanise Campaign has come to Korea through the Biennale, and through Humanise, we have realized that we have been building cold, efficient buildings until now, and that we need to change in order to build more sustainable buildings that we can care and love. And I think it is a very important message that has been given to us. Would you like to make some final comments?
Thank you. I suppose it's a challenge to everyone in this room. You know, I think we wouldn't be in this room if we didn't agree there was an issue and that we could do something about it. So maybe we can find the right networks and talk to our friends and family. And is there a world where we can use that fan and make a protest here in Seoul that the rest of the world can see, that can really boost this public conversation? So I'm around if you want to talk to me about how we make that happen. Pally, let's go.
감사합니다.